So, what is the best way to run a country? For a long time, it felt like we had a pretty simple answer to that. But as we look ahead, well, that old simple answer is really starting to show some cracks. We hear it constantly, right? It's always framed as this huge, epic showdown. You've got team democracy over here and team autocracy over there. The free world slugging it out with the, efficient state. But what if that whole way of looking at it is just wrong? A total distraction. What if the real secret sauce to a successful country has almost nothing to do with how you pick a leader and everything to do with something else entirely? Okay, to get why that might be, we've got to first break down the classic argument. For years, this whole debate has been boiled down to a super simple this or that choice. So on one hand, you've got democracy. Its whole thing is freedom, right? The process is elections. Then on the other side, you've got autocracy. The big selling point there is usually efficiency, and the process is, top-down command and control. The whole thing is framed as this big trade-off. Hey, what do you want? More freedom, or do you want a government that can just get stuff done fast? But here's the thing. Focusing only on that trade-off, it completely misses the most critical piece of the puzzle. If you really want to understand what makes a country work or fall apart, you have to look at a totally different metric. And that metric, the thing that really matters, is this: state capacity. It sounds a bit academic, but it's actually super simple. It's just a government's actual ability to do its job. Can it deliver services like healthcare? Can it enforce its own laws? Can it, just keep the lights on? Think of it as the engine room of a country. Without it, nothing else matters. And this is where the rubber meets the road. High state capacity, that means the government can actually deliver on things like schools and hospitals. It means the laws apply to everybody, not just folks with the right connections. It's what gives a country stability and lets it tackle those massive, long-term projects that define its future. It's not about ideology, you see. It's all about competence. All right, so if high state capacity is the goal, how do our two big systems, democracy and autocracy, actually try to get there? Well, on paper at least, each one brings a unique strength to the table. And that's where you get this really interesting core tension. Okay, so democracies, they've got a killer app: adaptability. That whole self-correcting mechanism, we call them elections, it's a genius way to get rid of bad leaders without, a civil war. And that freedom fosters all kinds of innovation. Now, autocracies, they play a different game. Their big strength is stability. They can cook up and actually execute these massive 30-year plans without ever having to worry about an election, which means they can be incredibly decisive and move super fast. But, and this is a huge but, here's the catch. Both systems, for all their differences, share the exact same Achilles heel. There is one single point of failure that can rot either one from the inside out. And that vulnerability is a lack of meritocracy. That's just a fancy word for a simple idea: putting competent people in charge. Without it, a democracy can just slide into a kleptocracy, basically rule by thieves. And an autocracy, it just becomes a brutal tyranny. So the real takeaway here is that competence and integrity, they are way, way more important than whatever label you slap on the system. Okay, so that's the theory. But we all know the real world is a lot messier, and frankly, a lot more interesting. So let's dive into some real-world case studies of countries that just completely shatter these neat little categories. First up, let's head to Singapore. Its entire system, its whole identity, was basically built on the super pragmatic philosophy of its founder, Lee Kuan Yew. And this quote, well, it pretty much says it all. What he built is what you might call a hybrid model. On the surface, it kind of looks like a democracy, but it's really more of a soft authoritarian state that has an insanely high state capacity. So what's the secret sauce? Well, for one, paying the civil service really, really well to make corruption not worth the risk. And two, enforcing a strict policy of multiracialism to make sure everyone feels included and the society holds together. The deal is crystal clear. You get massive economic freedom, but in return, you accept very limited political freedom. All right, next, let's jet over to the Middle East for a totally different approach: the United Arab Emirates. Now, this is an autocracy for sure, but it runs less like a traditional country and way more like some kind of futuristic mega corporation. The UAE used what some people call autocratic speed to pivot their entire economy away from oil like overnight. And how'd they pull that off? By building a genuine meritocracy, hunting down the best talent from all over the world. And this creates a very specific social contract. The government delivers unbelievable wealth and safety, and in exchange, people are cool with limited political say. The ruler, yeah, they act way more like a CEO of a massive company than a traditional can. Okay, for our last case study, let's look at Vietnam. Now, it's another one-party state, but it's fascinating because it goes out of its way to avoid the strongman model that we usually picture when we think of autocracy.
Yeah, their system is seriously interesting. Power is deliberately split up between four top jobs. They call them the four pillars. What this does is it forces them to build consensus. It stops any one person from getting all the power. It's basically a system of checks and balances, but inside a single party. And whatever you think of it, you can't argue with the results. It has powered one of the most amazing economic turnarounds we've seen in recent memory.
Okay, so we've looked at all these different models. What does it all mean for the future of how we run our countries? Where is all this pointing as we head toward 2026? Which brings us right back to that big ultimate question. After seeing just how messy and complicated the real world is, can you really, honestly declare one single system as the best? Well, the answer that seems to be emerging is all about being pragmatic, about mixing and matching. The ideal system, maybe, combines the best parts of both. You absolutely want that democratic exit ramp, the ability to vote out bad leaders. But you also want the engine you see in some autocracies, that super professional, non-political civil service that can just keep executing a 20-year plan for the country, no matter who's in charge after the latest election. Because being a purist about this stuff is actually really dangerous. A pure democracy can get totally gridlocked and turn into what's called a vetocracy, where so many people have a veto that nothing ever gets done. And a pure autocracy, that's a huge gamble. It's called the good emperor problem. It works great until you get a bad emperor. Then one bad leader can drive the whole country off a cliff, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. So that's really the final thought to chew on as we look to 2026 and beyond. Maybe, just maybe, the most important question isn't what do we call our system of government. Maybe the only question that truly matters is, does it work? Can it actually deliver for its people?